You're listening to the RMPodcast, the official podcast of Red Moon Productions. Here are your hosts, Brandon Davidson, Keith Cheatham, and Sean Sebastian. Enjoy.
Welcome to yet again another episode of the Red Moon Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Brandon Davidson, alongside our normal new host, Sean Sebastian, and
Bradley Bradshaw Biddlesworth.
Bradley Bradshaw Biddlesworth. He's joining us this evening. You just look great, Bradley.
Yeah.
You know, I'm surprised that you didn't have a personality with your name there.
Yeah. I commented it on our own feed just for the heck of it.
What?
And it's listing me as an anniversary follower, and I have no idea what that is.
Because you always tune in. You're a loyal viewer.
It says, it has like a little symbol with a 5 in it. Does that mean I've been following for 5 years?
That or you're
getting some feedback.
I am.
Yeah.
This board, there it is.
Oh, wow.
I should have checked before the show. I'm sorry. Technical difficulties.
I was just trying to share how I like cheese in our comments. Now there's just static everywhere.
Sorry.
Yes.
That was very annoying for our viewers. I apologize. Should have checked that before the show.
I challenge all our viewers. I've never seen an anniversary listener anywhere before, so I challenge all our viewers to listen and get that get that little anniversary listener.
You want that
badge.
status, the anniversary status.
I want to see those little badges on everybody's comments.
Yes. You get that by breaking the paywall.
Absolutely.
You have to pay and subscribe.
It's not true. I've never paid for anything with Red Moon.
It's $10
and
a
I've never
month.
been paid by Red Moon, so we're perfectly even.
That's not going to change anytime soon.
I know. That's why I'm not
Sorry.
going to pay for anything anytime soon.
But no, absolutely like, share, subscribe on all of our social media platforms and become an anniversary member and get rewarded by all the content we provide here every single week. The entertainment on the Red Moon Podcast. We got a great show packed. With tons of news.
The show itself is great. Not everything that'll be within the show.
True.
Will be great.
Well, we always are. We brighten everybody's day by just being entertaining.
Some of us always are.
What are you saying?
That me and Sean are better than you.
You know, look, I have you all know it was less than 3 months ago that I was hosting this show by my lonesome, and I garnered.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I'll have you know that you think you got a 5-year badge anniversary? I'm gonna have a decade on you. Okay,
I'm already a quarter of a way through this coffee. I'm geared to go.
Man,
I'm hyped. I'm over
he
here.
is hyped.
I don't know if you can see. I'm over here swiveling in my chair. I'm jittery. I'm ready.
I had a little dash of
cocaine.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're going to be ready for this show. And we got a lot to talk about. We got like 3 headlines we're going to get through.
Yeah.
Some more craziness on the Rust set. Someone's going to have their arm chopped off, maybe.
We're tackling Marvel's
So
Marvel's latest film and the implications of some of their new writers.
Yeah, absolutely. And the future of Hollywood. And we've even got some, breaking news about some technologies.
Technology.
All the technologies that
Technology.
are some monumental shifts in the industry. Honestly, it's pretty exciting.
There's all kinds of interesting. It is.
Disney
it's a good show.
Is releasing IMAX. It's gonna be crazy.
Why don't we quit talking about what's going to be in the show and just actually do the show?
I think that's a smart idea.
Good idea.
Sean. You know what? Yeah, why don't you introduce the movie? You never do.
I will. That's perfectly fine. So
Yeah.
Sunday night we went and checked out Eternals,
Yes.
Marvel's new big if you can call it that, blockbuster movie.
I mean, it's been making money.
It's
so.
making money.
Yeah.
It's getting the monies. So
I like how Sean gets straight to the point. We always beat around the bush and tease things.
well, I like to be out of here by 10.
He
And
tries.
It hasn't happened for like 6 months.
It's not going to. But not on this show.
We do guarantee that you'll get the review within the first 10 minutes.
And
so,
that normally happens.
right. So here is Marvel's Eternals.
The Marvel powerhouse returns with their latest in the MCU, Eternals. Marvel's 4th phase, consisting of movies and Disney Plus series, has so far delivered success after success, giving fans hope that the MCU, post-Endgame, still has plenty to offer. Now Marvel dives back into the more obscure reaches of its catalog to bring us Eternals. though it seems Marvel's streak for turning unknown properties into popular hits has ended. Eternals tells the story of the creation of life in the Marvel Universe by that of the Celestials, who also created the Eternals, a race of godlike beings designed to defend humanity from the evil deviants, and guide humanity in its evolution. When the deviants thought dead for thousands of years return, the Eternals must reunite to defend the Earth from an ancient evil. Directed by Chloe Zhao, winner of Best Director at the last Academy Awards, a fact blazoned across the film's trailer, Eternals promised to open the MCU up to an even wider aspect of the comics the films are based on. Finally delivering on who the Celestials are, characters first teased in the first Guardians of the Galaxy. While ambitious, Marvel's track record for adapting obscure characters and stories has been one of massive success, so fans eagerly awaited what seemed to be the tip of the next big thing after Endgame. What fans received was a slogfest with a plot encumbered by too many characters and too much mythos crammed into one film. With 10 Eternals on top of side characters and villains, the movie has too many characters each with their own backstories, personalities, and mythos to endear audiences to any particular character. Covering the creation of life and jumping back and forth between past and present to show what the Eternals have been doing for thousands of years, the movie also feels disjointed. The movie goes briskly from scene to scene as there is a lot of ground to cover, yet despite the quickness of each set piece in the film due to the amount of exposition needed to cover so much mythology, the movie still feels slow and dull. Yes, there are plenty of action pieces within the film, but even the fight scenes are only average with uninspired choreography. Zhao's lack of experience with any type of action medium is obvious. Yet even in the drama, where Zhao as a director usually excels, I was left wanting. Without any time to give depth to the relationships among the characters, all attempts that are made to evoke emotion fall flat. Eternals tries to rectify this by choosing a few characters to focus on, primarily such as Cersei, played by Gemma Chan, and Icarus, played by Richard Madden. But even still, there's not enough presented on screen to make me feel a connection to them. Ultimately, by the end of the movie, I just didn't care about anything I had seen. The film is boring and completely average. With a runtime over 2.5 hours, a plot I don't care about, and characters I don't care about either, Eternals proves to be Marvel's worst film to date. Hopefully this is just a slight step back for Marvel and not a sign of things to come. I give Eternals 2 out of 4 stars.
Oh, no. 2 out of 4 stars?
Are we all on the same page?
We indeed are.
We are?
I think we
2?
are on this one.
Yeah.
I'm settling on 2. Yes.
It was the dullest and dumbest Marvel film, and I mean not dumb in a sense that like I don't want to say like I think Thor: The Dark World kind of had some dumb moments.
Yes.
This was just at least Thor: The Dark World's plot is basic and as dull as it is solid. It makes sense. There are I think a lot of things in this movie that in the grand scheme of Marvel, especially introducing the Celestials, and I mean we've already seen like it was. That idea is introduced in Guardians of the Galaxy. Mm-hmm. Peter Quill, Chris Pratt's character, is supposed to be part Celestial, and then you learn his father, Ego, in the second one was a Celestial. Yeah. But then none of that lines up with the Celestials in this movie.
Well, and it's interesting because
that's
also,
not the only plot hole.
Thor: The Dark World was what, over a decade ago at this point?
Yeah.
And
it was.
I mean, come on, it's
Marvel
early
Phase
Marvel.
2. Yes, early Marvel.
I was gonna say
they've learned a lot since then.
No doubt they have, and this is a huge step backward. If you had any doubt that Marvel could fail, this proved you wrong.
Yeah.
This definitely cemented that.
I thought Captain Marvel, to me, was the other than Iron Man 3, which I'll watch Iron Man 3.
I'll watch them all.
But
actually,
Captain Marvel, to me, was the worst, the
Yeah.
weakest so far, but then this came along.
Out, yeah.
So
Actually, and I'm glad you even brought that up, because if I could sum it up, here's the thing. Some good things, some mediocre, ultimately dull, like you said in the review.
Yes.
And yes, the ultimate ending walking out of the theater was, don't need to see that again.
No.
I won't watch it again.
That's the thing. There's honestly, until this movie, like even Captain Marvel, I would rewatch again. This is the first one where I'm like, if I did a run through of every Marvel movie like I've done in the past,
I'd skip it.
Skip
I
that.
don't really feel a desire to rewatch this.
Well, and I think you even said coming out of the theater that what's really confusing about this is what does this leave? We're trying to set things up for what's
this
to come.
is supposed to be the beginning of what, Phase 4?
Oh no! I mean, we're already halfway. Like we're already in Phase 4. That
We,
started
well,
with
yeah, 'cause
technically,
technically we've been in it since
WandaVision.
Spider-Man. I thought.
No, that was the
yeah,
that was the end.
end. Oh,
yeah,
I
yeah.
got you. Okay.
But I'm not. I know I should be, but I'm not really counting the Disney spinoffs.
Well, I mean,
I'm
Black
not-
Widow and Shang-Chi are still Phase 4. So,
yeah, but I just didn't think. To me, I'm thinking of like the next big saga, and
Well, yeah, I would say
Shang-Chi might play a part, but Black Widow doesn't. To me, that doesn't play.
Well,
any part.
Black Widow doesn't only because it's a prequel to Endgame.
right.
it only
and
sets up
Infinity
whatever's
War.
going on with Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character
Yeah,
in the
right.
end credit scene, and then Shang-Chi's end credit scene is alluding to something bigger.
Right.
This movie, and I don't think this movie was necessarily intended. I mean, we know they're setting up the multiverse. They started that with WandaVision and Loki, and then we're getting Spider-Man and Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
And then Kang the Conqueror is being hugely set up. And those are the things I know that are being built to right offhand, because Kang is a Thanos-level villain. But then we get Eternals, and I assumed, like, obviously with like them having to have a bigger role in the creation of some of the Marvel Universe, and also some of the villains, such as we get a post-credit scene, spoiler alert,
Spoiler!
with a character that I won't go too far in depth, but is heavily related to Thanos. So I know like they're building towards something, but I can't make out, to me, and the Eternals were never a popular comic series anyway. I told Brandon this before the show. They've literally had 50 issues since their inception in like either the late 60s or early 70s. They've brought them back every now and then, and they never sell well. They've never done well.
The whole point
And-
of the Eternals is just to kind of be a genesis for everything else.
Yeah.
And it's like all of the everything else is what we care about. We're not really caring about
Yes.
the genesis that spawned
But
that.
even still, it's like, okay, but if that's the case, do you want to spend a whole movie? Like, you can build this up in other movies. Like,
Right,
the Celestials could have been introduced and
Yep.
explained
well,
in other
they
movies.
tell you the Eternals will return.
Yeah.
So we
Well,
know we're
and
either
that
going
was-
to get them in another movie or we're going to get another Eternals movie.
And they
I'm
have,
like,
I was going to say, they have always been around in the comics, in other comics. They've been in Avengers comics. They've been in big events. But having their own series, they've never sold well. And
See,
that's
and
kind of
that-
how I feel about the movie. It's
that-
like,
I was gonna say-
maybe you didn't need a movie of the Eternals.
Well,
Right,
and part of it was because some of the things I wish they would have focused on, they just kind of took a back seat. I was more interested in how they played a role throughout history, and ultimately, too,
Yeah.
I liked how you explained that before we went and saw it. It was like some of the Greek, the Greek mythology
not
that
just
we're
Greek,
used to.
the Aztec
But,
gods,
yeah, exactly.
all a lot
all
of the
of
gods.
all of the
right.
mythos that we
even,
know.
even God in general. I mean, at towards the end of the film, the celestial, what's his name, Ashiram.
Yeah,
Or
Arishem.
what Arisham or
Yeah.
whatever, he says like
The
I'll
judge.
come back and there will be a judgment.
Yeah, that's
and
his
I'm
role.
Like,
He's
yeah,
the
that's
judge.
like that's a total biblical like allegory.
Well, yeah,
Right,
because that's
but-
what these
I
are.
mean-
There is no.
Oh no, I get
within
it.
the Marvel universe,
There
they
is no
have,
God and Jesus. I
They
understand that.
have their
but-
own mythology.
Yeah. And
But I
Athena
liked-
is
I liked-
Athena.
Yes.
Well, and I was
yeah.
gonna say I like that she was like drop the A,
Drop
'cause
the
that was
A.
something
Yes.
that came from the
It-
myths,
it's
and
kinda like
Right.
with-
but they didn't focus on. They didn't build that mythology within this movie,
No.
which is supposed to be what they did. They're supposed to do with an entry, level film that's supposed to introduce 10 new characters.
There was
and
too much
by-
mythos trying to cram.
I was
into
gonna
one
say
film.
all of the things that they did. They had to make this whole plot. It's 2 hours and 37 minutes.
Yes.
and it's 2 hours and 37
It's
minutes.
one of
way
Marvel's
too long.
longest movies to date,
Which is-
outside of Endgame, which was 3 hours.
And it's kind of sad considering that so much of that's wasted on just the plot of this film, when the stuff I'm more interested in is it's so disjointed in how this film is edited, because they do so much where they introduce here we are in present day. Well, now we got to go back to tell you just a little bit of we were at the start of human creation.
Yep.
And then we jump back to present day to say, oh, this threat that was relevant at the beginning of time is now back. Well, let's go back in time to see how we got to where we are in present day. But it's never fulfilled. It never seems like it's completed. It's a jumbled mess plot-wise.
Yeah.
And ultimately, all of those cool scenes that they show from past events and how they are incorporated never really seem they're not even appetizing. I don't really care.
They could have
They're
made a whole
wasted.
movie going from past up
Yes.
till present day, explaining who they were, what the deviants are, and then focus on
No doubt.
more of the celestial stuff in another movie. or even bring them in as a major like crossover threat, like, you know, rather than handling, because that's the thing, you introduce you to 10 Eternals, they have the Deviants, and then they bring out this whole plot twist with the Celestials and what their real purpose is regarding the Eternals, and it's like too much. You never get a feeling for who any of the characters are, despite some of the flashbacks.
And it all wraps up.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it could literally be, that could be the end of the.
Yeah.
I mean, they do
other
leave it
than
a little bit
the
open.
Celestials coming back,
but yeah, how long is that going to be?
And that would be
2
like
trillion years.
That would
we
be
don't
like
know.
an Avenger level threat, because they have had to fight the Celestials in the comics before.
See, and
but
that
But
was
then
the other
again,
thing.
like, it's like, how do you fight something like that? It's the planet Earth is a pinprick.
Well,
Let's-
and I even
Galactus is that big too. And
I
the
know,
Fantastic Four, yeah.
But even that exposition of explaining it, while it could have been cool had it been done well, or not, it wasn't that it wasn't done well, it was too rushed. And I immediately knew as soon as the scene started, I'm like, here we're going to get a crap ton of, you need to know this because this is backstory, and if you don't have this, well, then you won't really understand what's coming. And again, it just felt like an information dump, and that never seems good, especially in a Marvel movie. It honestly felt more like
That's
a
what
Zack Snyder, we need to have this dialogue,
Yes.
so this explains what our motive is. And I'm like, I don't want to see that in dialogue. I want to see that in plot, and then the dialogue helps carry the plot along because of the characters that you're
I
developing.
feel like the entire movie was just an information dump. Like, that's all this movie was.
But
Here's an information dump.
But I didn't feel like I got any information. At the end of the movie, I didn't know what was going on.
Other than
And
the generic
Marvel
plot
has
of the
always,
film.
Yeah, Marvel has always been good at making these films for people who aren't huge, dedicated fans of the comic books.
Yeah.
I don't know everything about all of the Avengers, but every film gives me the info that I need for the story that they're trying to show me on screen. I don't need to know every battle that they've fought. I don't need to know everything about the relationship between Cap and Bucky. I don't need to know all that. I just need to know enough to get me through this story, and they do that. And with Eternals, I felt like they were relying on a lot of people knowing who the hell the Eternals even are, which I didn't. And then they're also trying to give you this information, but by the end of the film, I felt completely in the dark by most of what I've seen. Even at the end, it's like with the Avengers, and we talked about this in the theater, the end credit scenes that give you bits and pieces of Thanos. It's like, I knew who Thanos was, not a whole lot about that character, but the end credit scenes gave me enough to just know, okay, this is the big bad. This is the threat, and this is his goal. And every film was, you get one more piece of what he's coming for. And in this movie, the end credit scene, it's like, okay, we're going to introduce 2 or 3 characters that most people probably don't even know. And it didn't give me enough to even know.
Should even be hyped.
Why? Why should I be excited about this? Nobody in the theater, which there wasn't a lot of people anyway, and I understand it was a Sunday night. But yeah, I have a feeling that even on Friday night when the movie came out, there probably wasn't a whole lot of people that were going or clapping like they did when they saw Thanos for the first time.
Only, maybe people who are fans of the comics, and even then, it's like they're not
down, Edie. Gosh,
you're right. There's not enough there to make you like, oh yeah, this is the next big thing, and it's because it's not. You don't really know where they're going from here, or why you should even care about these characters.
Well, I was gonna say, and I think that the most disappointing fact about the point we're making is that we've now had a decade-long adventure with Avengers.
Yeah.
And that whole
Big shoes to
entire
fill.
That, and also this was supposed to prove the last several films, and especially even with WandaVision and Loki and Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
I've been very pleased until now.
Well, but that's my point. Is this was supposed to show how seasoned Marvel was, that they couldn't make this kind of misstep, and so I think that's kind of what we've maybe incubated on a little bit after the movie was, okay, well, why was this such a misstep? What went wrong? Was this, part of it, I chalked it up to possibly being that they gave, a director who is kind of an unknown, but she's very publicly known for her acclaim in terms of having directed Nomadland from last year.
Yeah.
It was her mark in terms of setting her name in the industry. And they were like, okay, we got this Academy Award-winning director who's coming in. We're going to give her a little bit more credit in terms of kind of deciding what she wants to do with this film.
Right.
And yet I think that's what ultimately led to it being a jumbled mess, is you have somebody who necessarily, not that I think she had a desire to set out and make a bad movie, but she had a desire to kind of dip her toe into a realm of popularity with these superhero films that she knows are obviously a status symbol.
To do something that's distinctly not Marvel as well.
Yes, but also to prove her weight.
Yeah.
To say, look, I can step outside of my own comfort zone and go from a smallish indie flick to, I think, really what we saw with Patty Jenkins and her era of ways on Wonder Woman 84.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, we gave her a little bit more control. She has a
free
little
reign.
bit more direction. And with that free reign comes, okay, I'm going to do things that people aren't expecting or are a little different from. I mean,
Right.
people have touted,
Subvert
we had the.
expectations.
Well, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
we're
Thanks,
kind
Ryan
of-
Johnson.
That's a
I don't know if you wanted to.
phrase that I hate to use.
Yeah,
But
I don't know if you want to go ahead and transition into
Yeah, I
headlines.
think so.
Because we're kind of, that's where we're getting anyways with this,
Yeah.
is how this went wrong. And that is our kind of our first headline. So if you want to go ahead, I think we might as well
I
just
think that's the best
go
thing to
into
do.
that.
Yeah.
Let's roll that wonderful open. Oh, she
she
answered.
loves it. She gets excited.
the
Edie-
high pitch thing.
Gosh,
that really
So,
gets her.
and you already said, like, giving it to Chloe Zhao. Our first headline was these next gen writers that are the whole headline is just in regards to kind of like action Hollywood and
Right.
comic book movies in general, but a big chunk of those are obviously Marvel, which is why that ties in.
Yes.
I know they mentioned Blue Beetle, which is DC, but most of the other movies they mention are Marvel movies. And yeah, it's like how it says how Blue Beetle, the Eternals writers are penning the next generation of superhero stories. And it's fine. I have not like Marvel. Something I think they've always done well is taking chances on lesser known people or unique takes like Taika Waititi, the Russo brothers, James Gunn,
Yeah.
and that's good. But at the same time, you still have to have that focus. Something that I felt Kevin Feige has always done well is
Yes.
maintaining what the Marvel universe is. And with Eternals, I do feel like this is the first step back where you have Chloe Zhao, and I don't remember the writers for Eternals.
They mentioned him in there. It's Kaz. I forget his last
Cos
name.
and Ryan Furpo.
Ryan
Yeah,
Furpo.
there you go,
Okay,
yeah.
yes,
Michael
I see him.
Waldron.
And I mean, obviously, it's fine. I mean, you have up and coming talent. You want to give them a chance. I don't care who they hire to be writers, directors, if they're a good fit. But that's the thing is making sure one, it's a good fit, and also making sure that you still have that even Kevin Feige, because
I was going to say
obviously
it's
he's
that
still
oversight.
involved.
Exactly.
And it's like, how did this slip through? Like Kevin Feige's usually so meticulous with every Marvel film and how
well,
it
they've
goes
all talked about it. That's
Yeah.
the one thing we've known
So
is
where was
ever
the
since
oversight with Eternals? How did he let this one slip through in this way?
Right, because we're so used to all of the creators who have been introduced into the Marvel Universe who come from that varied background, who have a different style, that they're looking to add a different taste in people's mouth for the MCU. But ever since it's become so established what the MCU is with Kevin at the helm, it's kind of been this known factor that people are like, oh, they have everything tight knit and they have everything wrapped up so that it one seamlessly leads to the other. And it's even made some people kind of either back off from it altogether and say, well, okay, there's no room for me to really throw my creative weight here.
I mentioned the other night and I mean, I didn't take their opinion very seriously because it's CNN, but CNN said part of the problem was that Chloe Zhao is restricted by the MCU frame and you can only do so much. And I'm like, no, I don't think she
no.
was restricted. She just
didn't
made a crap
follow
movie.
the MCU
and-
recipe at all.
And that's what I was gonna say. And I hate to go there right off the bat, but for me, especially with knowing Kevin Feige still the head of all this, I think part of it is also this shift in focus because I've seen a lot of articles going over this from different writers at Marvel, even Kevin Feige himself, and a lot of this is we do now, and Marvel's tread the line so far, but there's this huge shift at focusing on diversity and these woke agendas.
Wokeness, yeah.
And they champion it very hard. Even Kevin Feige said future Marvel movies will be more diverse and will have more of this in it. And it's like,
well,
and
it's almost like they put the sunset on. Endgame was the hey, don't. This is comic books as you remember it,
yes,
right?
now we're going to
We're going to move on to the future
And here's
of
the
what
thing.
these superhero
Right,
movies
well,
can become.
If you look at the I'll have to look up their ages to be 100% certain, but looking at the photos of these people,
They're all young.
They're
yeah.
young.
They're younger
millennials.
characters. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh, and again, I don't
and,
care.
and I think they
who
want to
hire.
champion that.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of this article. Is that apparently I think I forget who prints up the article. It may be Hollywood Reporter.
Hollywood Reporter's the
but,
article.
But what's in the first paragraph they mention that they do like a whole
for
spotlight.
the annual next gen issue? Yeah, next
Yeah,
gen.
so they're basically putting a spotlight on these people who have obviously they're focusing on the
generation of Hollywood.
superhero.
Well, the next generation of superhero are bisexual Supermans.
or
So-
and here's the
gay
thing.
black Eternals.
What's his,
or,
the Black Eternal? What's
yeah.
his name? Come on, give him a name.
Fastos?
Fastos.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the
there it
character's
is.
name.
Gay
I forget the actress.
Fastos.
Here's
Well,
the thing.
hold on. Not only that, but it's not even about that. They've also championed the more mature tone in terms of it having the first on-screen sex scene.
And again, I don't care.
Which isn't even that explicit, but it's
No.
still
Yeah.
It obviously is
change.
out of. I would say you definitely notice it because it's in a Marvel film, but it's also because not
It's
because
so
it's
out of place.
matured, but it's
Yeah.
out of place.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say. I don't care.
That
like
was not needed.
especially with Eternals.
all.
Like
We've seen Dark Knight.
These
We've seen very
characters-
violent things
Yes.
happen on screen.
Yeah.
Very dark natured, senses of real world dread.
Yeah.
But then they want to act like, oh well, now Marvel's getting edgy, and I'm
and
like,
again, there are like obviously they've said Deadpool 3 is still gonna be R-rated.
yeah, we've had Deadpool.
That makes sense. There are darker characters. Blade's a darker character. I expect, even if that's a PG-13 movie, for that to be a darker movie.
Yeah.
The diversity angle. The Eternals are the basis for a lot of these mythological gods, so it kind of makes sense that they would be diverse.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
the problem is, I don't care if you have a diverse cast. I don't care if the behind-the-scenes writers, directors, whoever's diverse. The problem is the focus needs to be the story, not the diversity itself. And I feel like Eternals had that problem. They threw in this diverse group. I mean, you had one character who was deaf, and that's fine.
Yes.
The actress is deaf.
And she's the one. Most of the things that I've read about this movie, she's the one actress that's being praised above all of them. Was that they used a real deaf?
She's not a bad
actress.
actress. She plays a character in Walking Dead, and that character in the comics is deaf. Makari wasn't originally deaf in the comics, but the character, because the actress is deaf, is deaf. I don't care that you have all these diverse characters, but the movie doesn't. Like, just like even explaining that these are people that the gods are based off of now, that would give you a good reason for why it's diverse. The movie doesn't offer anything like that other than diversity for diversity's sake.
Right.
Fastos' character, again, I don't really care if he's gay, but it feels forced, just like.
Yeah.
I
The
like
sex
it.
scene.
The scene. Well, I was going to liken it to the scene in Batman v Superman with the Martha. You're killing Martha. It was a ridiculous. Yes. But here's the thing.
Yeah,
It's
it
all-
is.
You do it so much better.
But it's one of those things where it's like that's forced in there because
Yeah.
we know that's the relationship between mother and son, and it's a
Yes.
connection.
Right.
It feels forced. The same thing with Fastos' relationship in this movie.
Yeah.
Every line he has, the only identity he has is smart.
That he's a
is
gay
LGBTQ.
father.
He's smart and he's gay.
Yeah.
Everything he says is. It's like, for my family, and it's like, okay, I get that, but it feels like
Well, he
pointed
loses,
that you're
he
only
loses,
doing this.
He loses entire faith in humanity until he meets his husband, and then all of a sudden, the LGBT community has given him faith in humanity.
Yeah,
and
right,
again,
right.
I
And I'm
think,
like, what?
fighting for your family makes sense. Most superheroes do that, but it's
Yeah.
never so pointed. You never see, Spider-Man or Superman. We're like, this is for my family.
Well, it's
Like,
another 12%.
Yeah.
right, exactly.
It's
But
like
I think that's
you
what's
know
so
they're fighting for
ridiculous
them
about.
already.
That's kind of why, and maybe this is kind of the irony of the film in and of itself, is for something that is called Eternals,
Yeah.
and is focused on this group of people that has apparently been here for the span of time.
7,000 years.
The angst of their fighting and their capacity at which they believe and feel compelled to continue the fight, or even at one point, pretty much turn against what their initial purpose is. For all of their driving motivations, it's all so relevant just now.
Yeah.
It only makes sense to now. The reason why superhero comic books become, I think, so popular in terms of the last 15 years, or ever since, Iron Man 1 came out, or hell, even all the way back with Superman, Christopher Reeve's Superman, and even Batman from Tim Burton. The reason these have remained popular is because it's just like Greek mythology. There's age-old archetypes and battles that are waged within these stories that go to the very essence of human nature.
Yes.
And those are the stories that are worth carrying on and purporting, or worth reporting to tell. The problem with these current wave of writers, and I think this expands beyond just the Marvel superhero universe. I really do think this is a broader Hollywood issue. Is we are right now in a cultural war in America, in the West. And we're waging war as to what are the values we want to carry on to the next generation. And for so long, some of these values were cemented in the bedrock of our society, and they weren't questioned. They were, you'd have little offshoots here and there of, certain things that were focused on rebellion. But ultimately, everything came back to this one nice, neat purpose of what was the common fight that everybody could agree with and everybody could champion and join in with. The fight of that common man. And everybody looked up to superheroes because they would wage that war for us in ways we couldn't.
Right.
And the same with just Greek mythology and the ideas there.
Any
it wasn't
story-
that they partook in certain, what we consider woke ideology today, but the very essence of calling it woke ideology is because it's very empty and hollow on a very nuts and bolts basis. There is no fight other than just having it seen on screen or having it seen in the story, and that's supposed to be essence enough.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. It doesn't hold any weight, and I think that's why people walk out disappointed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
I was gonna say, I was just gonna say, any good story in general, I think, not just superhero movies or anything. When you look at the iconic stories that we've passed down and have seen, or movies that have been made, they tend to have like that allegory on a macro scale, like Lord of the Rings. Obviously, there's Christian allegory and there's World War II allegory, but there's nothing particularly in the books or movies that you could pinpoint and be like, oh, they're directly referencing this. Hollywood now is so focused in on micro issues, such as the LGBT community. It's like that exactly, they're pointing at it. This is exactly what this references, but that doesn't, like you said, harken to just human nature in general. It harkens to something very specific that doesn't last the test of times, like Ben-Hur or Lord of the Rings, or something that you can go back on and watch, and it's still relatable because it harkens to an overall human struggle, not something so that's just a pinpoint on the timeline of human history.
And I think that's really going to be the greatest failure. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to say, it goes back to your point about these messages being hollow, especially on screen. It just shows me that the writers don't truly, they really don't truly buy in or believe even the messages that they're trying to write into these films. If they did, then we would go see a movie like Eternals and we would walk away with a different thought. We would walk away. We would watch it and say, wow, that really made me think about diversity. That really made me think about gay marriage or whatever.
Fastos had a real personality, and his only identity
There's
wasn't
just nothing there. It's like they did it for the sake of doing it, and that therefore it's just hollow. So the writers, to me, don't even give it the time of day enough to write it well, because they don't really believe in it. They're only doing it because they want to push that boundary.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's one of two things. I think it's either they don't believe in it and they're too scared to promote the values they do hold dear, or just like we've seen in our culture over the last decade. I would really argue even within the last 5 years, a rapid pace in which we've kind of become, again, for the sake of just being nice or being kind, or these very platitude statements, nothing that holds any depth or meaning, but are just very on a general surface level, a common thing. Yeah, you would hope I share with my neighbor in terms of somebody I don't know well, but I have just general, okay, yeah, well, I hope you have a nice life and a good well-being. But ultimately, when it comes to the hard life decisions and the values that we have to continue on as a people, I think we're seeing also a very, I think ultimately in some of these writers, it may be just a struggle with that belief system. It may be a struggle of they have this hollow shell. They themselves are a hollow shell. And yet somehow society has pushed forth this message culturally. We've had a louder, minority becoming a majority in the sense of saying, no, these are what the purposeful fights we have to wage. These are the types of issues that should be at the forefront. And we've let those narratives become shaped by a hollow mass. And instead of people having something that they used to take root in and using that to fight back, it's more like people have given up and said, well, either it's not worth the trouble, I'll go along to get along just to kind of keep the normalcy alive and just kind of go along with my day and not really get into the thick of it. Mm-hmm. Or others who have said they've given up completely and said, well, maybe this is my purpose. Maybe this is my belief. Yeah. And I really do think that I think that's the struggle with Hollywood in general, and we're talking about the future of Hollywood, and I really do think that that's what we are now seeing is you look at the golden age of films that have come, we've talked about it just jokingly on the show before, the many different times that, we've talked about, we used to look forward to the Best Picture nominees or the winners.
Yeah.
And that, it used to be a good lot of them that would be nominated, that would be worth watching all of them to see what our picks are. But over the last 10 years, it's become really a slew of, okay, well, this covers this message, this covers this camp, this covers this group, and this is what represents their message. So it's not about the film and the merit of the film itself and what it teaches us in terms of human nature and how it speaks to us. It speaks to this group, and you have this group at large that has latched on to that message and said, oh, well, yeah, that is supposed to be what represents us. And I think that's really sad because we lose our individuality within that. And I think when you lose that individual nature, part of why I love watching something like, I just think back, and even I think the director's got something coming out, or it's akin to it, but something like Dazed and Confused. It's a message that everybody who's gone through puberty and everybody who's been in high school doesn't necessarily go through that 100% exactly the same.
Right.
But everybody's seen it, and it touches on a human nature level that everybody's experienced,
That's how I feel about
that it
Breakfast Club.
transcends. Breakfast Club,
Breakfast
yes.
Club is a movie that
any
every
John
teenager
Hughes
should-
film,
I was gonna
really.
say, any John Hughes film.
I think
is-
they
yeah.
should show that film in every school to every
Well,
teenager.
no, now
but-
because John Hughes films are offensive.
I know, but I'm just saying.
Molly
that's-
Ringwald said it
Yeah.
so herself.
Yeah, she said she won't show her daughters those
that
films.
movie has equal representation. I mean, it really does.
It does.
It
does.
caters
Because
to
it-
the jocks.
yeah,
It caters to the pretty
Yep.
girls. It caters to the potheads.
Well, again,
It
those
caters
are the
to nerds.
archetypes. Because it doesn't matter. Again, those
Well,
go
not
to
anymore.
the
Now the archetypes are all based on race.
or race or sexuality
gender,
or
sexuality,
gender.
yeah.
Or gender.
Yeah.
Again, we've traded one group of identities that really cut to what you felt and
You
experienced.
traded actual human characteristics
Yes.
and personalities for identity politics.
Yeah. Well, and again,
Wow.
the idea of that identity somehow transcending into a greater relevance, and I don't think it does.
I wish you could drop that mic, but you
Yeah,
can't. 'cause it's
just
attached.
throw it down.
Do it right
We
now.
don't need real human characters.
Oh,
That was a little harder than I meant to.
That's $200 right
yeah,
there, Keith.
yeah, I paid for it. I know.
I'll say it's his mic. I don't care.
It's like I just knocked it a little harder than I meant, but there we go. Mic drop.
We needed that.
It looked
we
good on
needed
the live
that.
feed too.
Yeah.
I just saw it. It was
we
funny.
needed that. But no, I think right
Edie's trying
now
to give me her rope.
she is.
She's trying to put it in
Well,
my
you,
hand. Look
You
at
play
her.
with that. I can't see it.
She
Drop your
dropped
mic
it. She
again.
dropped it.
There she is. Oh, look at her.
Ooh, I
Just
had a
look
cold
at
spell.
her.
Anyways, moving
But
right along.
I think the
Yeah.
future so far is bleak. I think right now we're in a cultural war, and again, I think this has become a lot of why we're so disappointed in some of these movies. I think, truthfully, that's what kind of gave us hope about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Is up until recently, you've seen those archetypes hold true to their original content, but for a new audience and for a new generation. And that was kind of why I was willing to go to bat for, in defense when you had the kind of attacks from Martin Scorsese or even recently as Denis Villeneuve. And so for me, oh, she's back. There she is.
You give her a little
Oh.
bit. That's why I ignore her. I just,
Yeah,
I'm
there it
doing,
is.
doing a show right
Look
now.
at her. She just wants to talk. She just. Hopefully that gives us some viewers right there.
That's-
Having
yeah.
Edie
Having
up on
You'll
the
have
mic.
to tag.
She's much
puppy
cuter
or
than-
dog or something in
Yeah,
there.
yeah, cute
Hashtag,
pup. You know,
Moon pup.
Hashtag.
moon pup. I
Hashtag
like
moon
that.
pup.
Moon doggy.
Moon doggy.
She's my moon doggy.
She's your little moon doggle.
But I right now think the future is bleak. I don't think
Yeah.
this is changing anytime soon.
No, and
I think we're going to have to go through a wave of these kind of because I really do. I think I have faith in humanity. I try to look at the glass as half full, and I really do think that we're going to have to go through a generational wave
you said
of
it
these
really
empty,
well
lost vessels,
in
these
the-
empty souls.
In the theater after the movie was over, Keith said, he said something in the effect of, I think Marvel has been very good in the past about rewriting its wrongs and
Yeah.
redirecting its wrongs, and that based
I
on
hope-
reviews and based on
True.
the people going to see this film, hopefully they will do what they've done in the past and they will right the wrongs.
course
and
correct,
course
yeah.
correct, exactly.
I hope, but as long as they're focused on one specific thing instead of story, it does. I agree with Brandon. It looks bleak. Now that I could be it could be Marvel does course correct like they always have and said, well, maybe we need to focus on making sure we have a good story
Maybe
first.
we'll focus on
But
money.
yeah,
Making
it's-
good movies so that people
Yeah.
buy a
Well,
movie ticket.
we'll see. I mean,
Well, and oddly enough, I mean, we went and saw. It's going to be reviewed here in a couple weeks. We went and saw French Dispatch.
that's next week.
That's next
yeah.
week.
Oh, next
Yeah.
week, yeah. because it's in between. Yeah, we got
And the
Ghostbusters.
week after
and
that, we have
Afterlife.
Ghostbusters.
Yeah,
I don't know if you noticed. We just went ahead. And,
I did.
Yeah,
I noticed that.
bought
I'm
the
like,
tickets.
we were like, we already know we're going to see it.
on
Yes.
Sunday at the
Yeah.
same time. It's
It's
fine.
like we already know. Let's just go ahead and make sure we get those middle seats because
I'm amped up. I'm
we went
ready.
and saw Eternals and we had like actually it was 2 people, but the thing online only showed
Yeah.
1. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think they cheated. He lied.
But ultimately, I mean,
Stole
the
our
thing
middle
is
seats.
French Dispatch was uniquely Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
We'll give our review next week. But again, what I love about certain directors that, I mean, even Tenet was a low point, but Nolan usually hits on a Nolan cylinder and,
Yep.
and he can keep it going.
There
and,
are
and
those who
he
want to
course corrects
create a
too.
great story and a great film, and they're
Yep.
not. They don't care about all the politics. They just want to make.
Right. Well, and
And,
I
yeah.
would even argue, you know, while I thought the weak point of the film was really the characters for the reason we're talking about now, still as a whole, Dune wasn't a bad movie. It just lacked that development. And you know, it's gorgeous to look at, and it ultimately
Yeah,
was,
Dune-
I know, his
Dune
vision.
didn't go woke, so we'll see.
But well, and again,
I don't know. I love
Tay,
it.
I
I like it. Yeah,
I love it.
like it.
I know you all
I've
did.
seen it 4 times now.
To me, it was just like
I love it.
it was just slightly better than Arrival.
Oh.
That was still Dennis
That's
Villeneuve.
saying-
That's
though.
what I'm
That's
saying. That's
saying
why
a
I
lot.
compared it. 'Cause
Still
Arrival
Villeneuve.
was one of the worst movies ever made.
Oh, I don't.
One of the worst movies you've ever seen.
I don't know if it's the worst movie ever made.
I'm
I
just
could see
kidding.
how
It's-
it would
yeah,
bore
no.
people or not be their thing, but I wouldn't say worse.
No, I
Yeah.
wouldn't. I was
Yeah.
kidding. I was
Yeah.
kidding. I was being facetious.
I know
but
you were. It's okay.
Even still,
What's next?
we're actually
Yeah,
going to
let's
talk
move
about
on.
AMC.
Let's talk about it.
They're doing better than people thought. Let's move on.
They are. Cinema Going is making a huge comeback as
I'm
reported by
not-
their quarterly numbers.
See, personally, I'm not as surprised as Hollywood and everyone else is. Everybody's like,
no.
it's a pandemic and people are going to the theater. It's like, yeah, because people are tired of being
They've been
cooped
locked up in their freaking houses.
It's like,
Exactly.
nobody
well,
cares
and this is what
anymore.
happens when you don't have all your movies go to streaming.
You know who cares?
When you actually bring them to the theater.
The media and the elite are the only one who are still
Push this
terrified
narrative.
of COVID. It's like most average people are kind of like, okay. It's safe to go out of our houses again. It is.
Yep.
Yeah.
And not to mention,
I'm a
I
little
think
fired up, but I'm just getting
I'm
tired.
just-
I'm tired of all the COVID crap.
Oh,
I
I am
know.
too. My son was quarantined from school like a couple weeks
So
ago.
stupid.
And I'm just like, he's sitting in the back of the van. I'm driving him home from school, and he's like, "What? We got to get you COVID tested and all this, so you can go back in a few days or whatever." And he's like, "Well, what happens if I test positive?" I'm like, "Then you have COVID. Like,
yeah.
what do you want me to tell you?
Yeah, I was like, you're
gonna be okay.
You'll be all right.
Yeah, I'm just
I mean,
like,
it's like
I'm
no
just like-
worries.
he's like, I'm like, you're gonna have a cold, and that's
Yeah.
it. It might be a little worse or whatever, but for you, you're young, you're healthy. You've got
You'll be fine.
Yeah.
You'll
less
be
than
fine.
less than a 1% chance that something bad would happen. And
Yeah.
it's like I'm willing to take that chance.
Yep.
But
Because
I'm
he-
just like, yeah, and he's just like, but he's heard from school and the teachers and other kids and everything. I mean, the teachers, all they do is yak about having to work, having to go back to work.
Imagine that.
I'm just like, that's your job. That's what you get paid to do. I mean,
Yeah.
what's the difference between you working during a flu pandemic or anything else? I mean, you got to worry about guns more than you got to worry about COVID in the school.
That's
Nowadays,
true.
Actually,
especially if
the
you're
amount
in
that
of
Jefferson
really
County.
is true.
You're in
JCPS
Jefferson
has been-
County, yeah.
It's been ridiculous.
I'm
I mean,
actually.
it's
I was
like
gonna say
every
there's been
week.
like three
There's
three
been
appearances.
four, I think.
Four?
Yeah, I know.
Gosh.
I think PRP's had like 2 Western, and I think one other. It's been ridiculous.
I'm just like, stop trying to scare my kid about.
Well,
about
again,
COVID.
it's like okay, we have
Put
greater
this
societal
fear-
concerns.
Yeah, you put this fear in my child's
But right,
life.
it's
I
like
do
what are
have-
they really
he
being
gets it,
sent to
like-
school for? Is it learning or is it babysitting or what? You know what's going on?
Going back to the article and the topic, though, I do have one question.
Yeah.
Because they have. I mean, it said that they've posted 755.6 million in revenue this quarter over the 119.5 they had last quarter, which that is a huge
That's huge, yeah.
increase.
Yeah.
But my thing is AMC going to actually fix their theater with this money?
That's
Because
what I posted. I posted this article with that because I
Because-
was like,
Wow.
"Come on, guys." Well, and here's where they might have an argument against that is they may say, "Well, yeah, but that's nowhere near what we were making pre-pandemic." So we still because technically they're still at a loss considering it's just way better than it was at this time last year.
Yeah.
But overall, they're still operating at a loss.
As
but
said-
I completely agree. It's like, okay, if you can't make some moderate or a modicum of improvements throughout your
hire
theaters?
somebody to cut the lawn?
Please.
Can you get
trim
somebody
the
to clean the
veg.
bathrooms?
Get
the bathrooms
the
were
bathrooms are terrible.
disgusting.
There was pea soup in the stall.
Oh,
I mean,
no,
I
yeah.
swear.
Yeah.
I went.
My shoes
It was
stuck
the
to
only
floor.
open stall, and it was like this thick yellow liquid because the toilet hadn't been flushed in so long. It's like, this is disgusting.
Yeah.
Gross.
The sinks were. I do
Oh,
want
the
to.
sinks weren't even
Yeah,
clean. It's gross.
Paper towels
yeah.
thrown
Oh,
everywhere.
I'm telling you. And then
You
not
walk
only-
out of the
And they're
bathroom,
worried
the
about
garbages are
COVID. You need to be
overflowing.
worrying about
just
every other
regular
disease.
hygiene. Well, and this
Yeah.
was the first time where we got there, and literally it was at the showtime. It was 7:30 on the dot,
And
and they
people
had
were
people
lined up,
waiting
Still
out
in
in the
line.
theater.
Yeah, they hadn't cleaned the theater yet.
No, they were
At-
still doing it.
at the
Usually
actual
you go in
showtime.
20 minutes before the movie starts sometimes.
Yeah.
To
like-
watch all the crap on all the
Well,
advertisements.
we
and
got
stuff.
in there about 10 minutes after. You know, the movie's supposed to start at 7:30. We get in the theater at 7:40. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's
Yeah.
okay.
That's insane.
It didn't start to, I don't know. It was. It's
and
just
I can't,
ridiculous.
I
Well,
can't
and-
believe that it's just our theater. It has to be. This
No,
has to be happening
I
nationwide.
think it's AMC. But here's the thing, because all these articles focus on AMC, and I think part of it is because they are the largest
They're the
theater
largest
chain.
theater
Yeah.
chain.
And I'm sorry, but that comes with the territory of also carrying the burden of responsibility to make sure you keep up the standard that you've promised
yeah,
us.
whatever theater
I
Nicole
think
Kidman's in.
ain't
in
AMC.
It's not AMC, no.
It's an AMC theater. It's got AMC everywhere. But I'm like,
Oh, that's
whatever theater
fake.
that
That's,
I know.
that's like the moon
I know,
landing.
but I'm like, there's not a theater in the country that looks like that. There's nothing.
But no, I
There's no
actually.
AMC that looks that clean.
What I'm more
No.
surprised by is at the end of this article, it jokes about not jokes, they're actually being serious about how the pandemic now has opened their mind to more streams of revenue. And he joked about on the conference call about teaming up with GameStop and also now accepting cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
And it was like basically, kind of taking not a jab, but going along with the whole, because they've had the fluctuation of game stonks happening with them as well. And yet I think it is a smart idea. I think it's smart to think about outside the box of not making and depending on one revenue stream from movies.
Well, it says
How
they're
can you
also going to
expand?
start selling their popcorn in shopping malls, and I mean that makes sense. I've seen plenty. Like you have Annie. Was it Annie M's, like the pretzel place, and they do have little
Auntie Anne's.
Auntie
I
Anne's,
think,
and,
yeah.
then they
Annie
have
M. That's
yeah.
Wizard of Oz.
Annie
Wizard of
Ann.
Oz, yeah.
I think it.
Annie M is
what-
it is
is
Annie
it?
Ann's, but Wizard of Oz is Annie M.
Oh, okay.
So, but
Annie
also
M. Annie M.
Popcorn Factory's popular. I mean, I could see an AMC type like popcorn kiosk doing well in a mall.
Their
That makes sense
popcorn
to me.
sucks at ours. It's like stale.
I was
freaking
gonna
popcorn.
say, yeah. I was like, you have to have. To me, that's the only problem is
They
that-
have fresh, good. Well,
that, but
here's the
also
thing.
because it's theater popcorn. That's what they're
Yes.
going
I
with,
know,
and I
yeah,
bet
I
you
know.
there's no other theater chain that's selling
Oh,
it.
no.
So you slap that AMC logo on there, and that's
when
what
it's
you're
good
gonna
and it's
get.
fresh, it does say usually their popcorn is good, but when you have workers
I want that
who
AMC
are
butter. Give me the
extremely
melted
slow
butter.
and everything's like pre-made because they can't keep up with the 5 people they have in line.
Yeah.
Like I mean, AMC's just
It's
been
gone.
terrible.
It's gone way downhill.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry. I
terrible.
understand the struggles, and it's not just with the theater industry. It's across the board right now. I mean, trust me, I understand everywhere I go. But ultimately, I'm still paying my $20 price, and yeah, I do get to see the movies I want to see, and it's a hell of a deal. But it's becoming increasingly a hassle and also something I'm not looking forward to when I got to either wait in line to get a snack or waiting in a premium line where I know I'm paying extra to get premium service
Yeah.
and I don't receive it. I had to mention to the guy behind the register when I got my ticket the other night, did you add points for the drink and the
yeah,
popcorn
they're
that I
supposed
got?
to scan
They
your
didn't
thing.
scan
And they
Yeah.
didn't didn't scan it. And
Yeah.
of course the manager was not the most she wasn't scolding me. She was more kind of making a joke at the employee of like, yeah, you got to remember to ask for that. But I was just sitting here and I'm like,
Just
but you
thanks,
could have
yeah.
stopped him before the incident occurring and could have stepped in and say, hey, remember, you got to ask if they have.
Yeah.
And I'm
She was
just
literally
like, she
behind
was
him
terrible.
leaning against the counter the
Yeah.
whole time. So she
Oh,
watched
wow.
us.
And
Yeah, I
just
didn't
making
see
little
that,
snide
yeah.
comments.
Well, this was when we went and saw French
French
Dispatch.
Dispatch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I'm just sitting here thinking, come on, guys. Yeah, this is just poor
Well, I
quality
had
service all around.
the survey for the free popcorn, and he didn't know how to enter that in. And I'm thinking, I understand if he's new to the registers and he's learning, but
He's
then
being
why?
trained,
But
yeah.
why is he in the AMC Stubbs A-list line?
Exactly.
It's like if
Yeah.
I'm paying premium, then the new guy should be on a register for the regular people, and because the whole point of
the regular people.
I'm just
Listen to
saying,
Keith, he's
I'm
privileged.
I am privileged. I pay $20
Paying
a
that
month.
$20 a month.
I'm supposed to get served first. I'm supposed to go through the line, and it's like, none of that happens.
It's
None of that
literally
happens.
it's perks that they mention every single time before a movie starts.
Yeah.
and
I don't get 'em.
I was gonna say
Don't
we
get 'em.
haven't received them for over a year
No.
now, and even before that, even before the pandemic, it was already that way.
It was sketchy, yeah.
I mean, there were times where we'd go in,
Well, it's
and
like
there's still the
now
seats
you're
that
s-
weren't repaired then are still not repaired.
No, and you're supposed to get the free upgrade on your snacks. So it's like you pay for a regular, you get a large.
Yeah.
But they're charging you now the
It's like
price of a
$8.
large.
Yeah.
Yes,
For the
regular.
Yeah. So
Yep.
now you're really not saving any money. You're not getting an upgrade.
A regular popcorn's $8. I think.
Well,
a large
here's
Coke's
what I
like
wanna
$6
know.
or $7.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I want to
now.
know this from AMC. I want to know this, and hopefully they're watching and critique. They're taking all of our critiques down. If you sell AMC popcorn outside the theater,
Yeah.
Is
can
it
I
gonna be-
bring it into the theater and use it if it's cheaper
You
and
should
eat it
be
there?
able to.
Hell yeah, I
You
better.
should be able to.
Because I mean,
Don't ask. Just put it in your hoodie
can't
and
cut
go.
into
That's
your
what I do.
profit. Yeah,
Put it in your hoodie.
he comes in there with Smart Pop in his jacket.
I pop my own and in a little baggie in my hoodie.
I'll be
Pull it
straight up.
out.
I go to the freaking Dollar Tree and get my candy for
Yeah.
$1.
Yeah.
I've
Well,
done
yeah,
it for
it's
weeks.
$6 for the same box of candy
Yes.
you can buy at the Dollar Tree for $1. Yeah.
And hell, now the
Yep.
5,000 reward points that you get for a small popcorn, it doesn't even
Well, that's
account
the
for
thing.
that.
I used
No.
to be okay with buying stuff to earn the points because $5
$5
would cover.
would get you something.
Yeah.
It would get you the popcorn
Or
or
a
it would
Coke.
get you Coke.
It doesn't
And
get you
Yeah,
either
they
one.
used to have the $5 where you got the small popcorn and a Coke for $5.
Yeah, they don't
They
do
don't
that
do that no
combo.
more.
Nope, they don't do the combo anymore.
No, so your rewards don't get
Even
you
add up.
anything.
You can't even get one or the other. At least you could get a Coke or popcorn for $5. Now it's $6 for a large Coke or $8 for a popcorn. So I'm like, I don't even feel like my rewards go anywhere.
Yeah.
Look, we beat up on AMC.
Yeah.
I want to move on to something
Let's
little
go
bit
ahead.
brighter, and that's talking about a
Rust?
venomous spider bite.
Yeah.
Rust is a cursed
I
film.
think the movie has already rusted.
I mean, I was gonna.
Now somebody suffered a terrible spider bite. And I mean, Alec Baldwin. Here's the thing.
No,
you
they
made,
said
you made the perfect joke.
They might lose an arm
Yeah.
over it.
No, seriously.
Yeah, it does.
They were closing.
Recluse.
They were closing down the set,
Yeah.
and he got bit by a spider, and it festered for a few days,
Yeah.
and he's gone. He's still getting
First of all,
treatment.
why did you not go? I know. Like,
no, I think they
sometimes
did.
you don't even realize you get
Yeah.
bitten until it starts to, have a.
And well, and they
Starts
and
showing
I would say
up
the
on ya.
doctor even they mentioned in the article specifically about how the doctor even says sometimes it may turn into nothing. It
Yeah.
just depends.
Yeah.
But in this case, it was like we're giving them all the antibodies we can, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, we just don't know at this point.
Well, not only.
but I'm just like,
is now
gosh,
somebody
man.
on the set of Rust about to lose an arm. I was about to say Peter Jackson. I'm going on to the next thing. Alec Baldwin now believes that police should be on set
Yes.
anytime arms are used, and I want to know, should they have like
Not arms, firearms.
firearms? Yeah.
Right. Well, you talked about somebody losing
yeah.
an arm,
That's
and then
true.
you said anytime arms are used. So I'm like,
Well,
let's clarify.
Yeah, arms. True. That's fair.
We want
It's
all
like-
of our police
yeah.
officers to have been bitten by a spider.
It's like,
True.
dang, they took his arm off because you're not allowed to have
Yeah,
those on set.
arms is another word for firearms or
I
guns,
know,
but I
it just
understand
seems
how that would
funny.
be confusing. Yeah, I do understand how that'd be confusing. But here's my thing: should we have venomologists on set in case people get bit by spiders?
Yes.
Should we have like any type of professionality? I mean,
Well,
think
the
we-
spider wasn't part of the production. The guns are.
still, it's like you can't prepare for
But
everything.
that's the absurdity of it. You to try to prepare for every contingency is
we should
ridiculous.
have. We should just have EMTs on
Well, and
set ready to
again-
go. We should have every type of specialty on set for any, because at the end of the day, the person holding the gun is who should be responsible for it.
Exactly.
And Alec Baldwin is once again trying to pass the buck. It's
Yep.
like, oh, if police
Yep.
are on set, they'll
I don't care how
they'll
sorry
magically know.
you say you are about the tragedy that happened. The fact of the matter is, the more you continue to come out and speak and say these utterances of whether it's retweeting somebody with a point that you would like to make, or even saying, I can't comment on this pending investigation, but it's like, no, there is no but. Shut up. You should have said the one thing that you said right after the tragic incident happened and then been quiet. But the fact that you keep coming out and keep pointing to these things or trying to have suggestions points to the fact that
just
you're
shows
trying to
how much of a
shirk
pompous ass
responsibility.
he is.
And yeah, that he is pompous. And he's showing himself for who he really is.
I just-
that nobody should be
the
surprised
guy
by.
who has villainized police for the last several
Yeah,
years.
that's the ridiculous part of it.
He is villain. I mean, he even made the tweet several years ago about the police officer that discharged a firearm and killed somebody. Wonder how it feels to accidentally kill somebody. Well, now you know,
Now you
Alec.
know.
And now, after villainizing the police,
Yep.
you want them on your sets like they have nothing better to do.
Oh,
than
and like,
just say,
like he wasn't part of this crowd over the last year that was defund the police,
yeah.
all
And
because
look
of the
at
George
all of those
Floyd killing.
cities now
Yep.
Exactly.
that are
Let's
overrun with crime.
defund the
and
police.
Now they can't get
Yeah.
police officers to
defund
come
the
in.
police, but we need them on our sets. It's like, yeah, they have better things to do than stand on set all day.
Yep.
And they don't. You don't even have enough
Well, and
police
again,
officers now as it is.
You're an adult. If you don't check the gun, and if somebody else whose responsibility it is didn't check it, again, it's the failure of individual responsibility. Just because there's a trained police officer on set doesn't mean that somehow a life is going to be saved if
Yeah.
people who intervene are still stupid.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, this is why we have stunt people. There are tons of precautions in this industry. Don't for 1 second sit here and and nobody's claiming this. He's the only person that is
that's
because
the
he was
problem.
involved. But nobody else is coming out other than friggin' idiot Dwayne The Rock Johnson, who continually
He's not going to use real guns in any of his
he
productions.
he
CGI
shows his
guns.
continual stupidity with regard to how much he really can think about these issues deeply. He doesn't. He just says what he thinks is going to get the most popular statement.
And how long is that going to last
Well,
anyway?
I can
another thing
understand
is
how many movies is he the executive producer of?
well, exactly.
Yes.
Most of the movies he's been in
Are co-productions.
are
with-
co-productions, and they're going to use
And
they're
and
going
that's
to
the
use
thing.
guns.
He could say none of his productions, but
Right.
like he's not, like you said,
That's true.
His company
gonna
isn't
do
the
it?
head production company of most of his movies. If he's in the next Jungle Cruise with Disney, you think Disney's gonna be like, oh yeah, we're gonna? It's like, no, we're not going to spend extra
Right.
costs
Yeah.
making fake
He's
guns.
obviously only saying what he has to save face
Yes.
and to be like, see, look, I care about lives. I mean, that's what all this is. It's just pandering.
It is.
It's just
Well, the thing
grandstanding,
is-
and it's exactly what we expect from Hollywood actors.
The regulations and precautions already set on most Hollywood productions weren't followed with Rust. So to say we need all these other extra precautions, it's like, how about you follow the ones you already had first?
Yes.
And then when they actually fail after being followed the right way, then maybe we can look at them. But as far
Yep.
as we've seen throughout the history of Hollywood, these precautions seem to work because this is a very rare event.
yeah, there's been two.
Yeah.
There's been two deaths as the result of a
Yeah.
of a
well, and
a
even
firearm
Alec
that was-
Baldwin made that point. And I'm like,
Yeah,
exactly.
last week.
Yeah.
So it's like, why the hell are you even bringing this up?
And
Or
there's
why
been
are you making
countless-
this?
There's been countless complaints of this production from the get-go.
Oh,
So
well,
it's
no,
not,
no,
it's not
But
just
he,
the
he
gun
also
thing, it's all kinds
retweeted
of other stuff.
He also retweeted a woman who last week said, "I was part of this set, and everything that they're trying to spin right now as a story of being unsafe is BS." And he retweeted it and was like, "Read this."
Yeah.
And so, and I'm like, well, now yet again, you're pointing to another instance
Right.
of
Now-
I'm trying to, CYA,
Yep.
and also point the finger at somebody else.
Yep.
Not my fault.
Look,
I'm
we-
absolved of this.
We're great. It's not my fault someone died, except you pulled the trigger.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep. Absolutely.
Just saying.
No, I know.
Another mic drop from
And
Mr.
you-
Keith
you-
Cheatham.
You paid for the trigger too.
Alrighty,
we
guys.
ready to
Yeah.
move? Yeah.
Let's move on to some happy topics. Let's talk about our wonderful multimedia segment.
Multimedia.
Multimedia. She's so rowdy.
Ooh, you just powered up.
I wanted to do something happy. We said
Yeah.
we're moving on to something happy.
We
you
are.
know?
We got a lot to talk about multimedia tonight.
all good news.
We're talking about some great stuff. Let's talk about that big one first, though. That first one, which is Disney dropped today some awesome news.
Oh yeah.
Shang-Chi, for one, is coming out next week on Disney+.
And I'm excited.
But also,
I liked that movie.
it, along with a plethora of other films, is it only in the Marvel universe or a bunch?
Yeah,
of,
only some of
Comes
the
out
Marvel
Friday.
films, and it's not all of them. It is. I looked at the list. It is most of the big ones, like the Avenger movies, the first Iron Man, Captain America: Civil War. Like their major movies
yeah,
are getting.
No,
they're
isn't that
getting the
amazing?
IMAX ratio treatment. The movies that were filmed with IMAX cameras or scenes that were filmed with IMAX camera will have that extra, like that taller ratio that fills the whole screen.
Yes.
and I can't wait, especially Endgame, because Endgame which is
It
one
was
of the
a majority
movies.
shot.
Yeah.
Most
with
of the
IMAX.
movie was shot in
Yeah.
IMAX, and I mean to see that whole movie filling my whole screen the entire time is going to be great.
It's the reason I love watching Dark Knight or
Yeah.
Tenet.
And they're already in 4K on Disney+.
Yeah, they're already in
So-
4K. They're just now going to have the scenes that are IMAX will have
Yep.
fill the whole. They'll have that actual ratio.
See, and this is one of those things, and we talk about all the time on here about preserving the director's vision. And this is just one of those small, subtle touches that just speaks to what, I didn't know I wanted it till it was offered. When I saw this, I was just like, this is something simple, and most people won't care. But the ones who do,
Yeah.
they're going to be appreciative of this.
Yeah, and there's no additional cost.
No, exactly. That was the beauty of it. It's like, no, there wasn't no extra added tier that they tried to throw out there. It was, we're including this for these films, and it's going to be available on just Disney Plus to Disney Plus subscribers.
Well, it also says they're calling it IMAX enhanced on Disney Plus, and it says
Awesome.
it'll also bring immersive DTS sound to the movies in the future.
Yeah.
So they're also not when they do the aspect ratio drop, but sometime in the future they're
Yeah.
also going to do DTS sound. Which I think
Dolby
is-
Atmos
yeah.
is coming.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
It's coming.
I
but
thought they
here's-
already were.
Maybe not
I
streaming.
thought they already had Atmos.
Maybe
they already
for
have
like their
Dolby Vision.
yeah, they do have Dolby Vision.
But I wonder if Dolby Atmos is
It,
supported.
it just
though.
says
Is it?
it'll bring enhanced immersive DTS sound to the movies. So I don't know
I'm thinking of
exactly
Apple.
what that
Apple
means.
already has Dolby Atmos. Maybe
Here's
thinking
the
of that.
list of the movies. I can read them off real quick
Yeah,
if you'd
do
like.
it.
That's so obviously Shang-Chi is going to have this when it drops next week. But then also the first Iron Man, Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2, Captain America Civil War, Doctor Strange, Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther, Avenger Infinity War and Endgame, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Captain Marvel. So they're mostly newer ones, which
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah,
Because the newer
I
ones
was honestly
were,
surprised
yeah.
to see Iron Man in there.
Yeah, I was too.
'cause that was shot on film.
Because it's so old. But I wonder if I'm assuming in order for them to have the ratio, there had to be something shot.
See, I'm wondering too. I mean, with this extra,
Because everything else makes sense because it's newer, and they started
Right.
using IMAX cameras after.
it
the-
started becoming especially but I'm also more curious. I mean, because there's always like the ratio on the back of like if you buy a 4K Blu-ray or something, or even some denote it on streaming services. But I'm curious because we've gotten the treatment with like a lot of Nolan films where you get the extra height.
Yeah.
But even sometimes I prefer even like the more panoramic view that you get from it's even wider sometimes. And I know a lot of them preserve that within just the standard aspect ratio conversion down to a smaller screen. But I'm wondering, even with this IMAX ratio, is that part of it, or is it just that it will fill up the whole screen? I didn't know. I don't know. I just don't know what to expect until I actually watch it and see it. Is that going to be the one difference that I ultimately see? Is that it just takes up my entire screen? Because sometimes you can tell when movies, especially of the older ilk, are they do like I don't want to say pan and zoom, but they do. They kind of zoom in and then they pan it to match.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how ultimately widescreen movies, most films are shot in widescreen, but the older days, it was like when they put them on DVD, they'd have them to fit full screen televisions. They'd do pan and zoom.
Well, and I was Googling just kind of see, because a lot of people actually do have that question with the first Iron Man. Like, that was the only one in the list that people are kind of like curious about. And the only thing that so far is stated is the original Iron Man. Most of Marvel movies were shot digitally, but the original Iron Man was shot on film.
Yep.
So people are wondering what he shot the film with, and maybe if there were, depending on what type of film he used, if there are some scenes that allowed for a large enough aspect ratio. So it'll be interesting to see.
Because even if they weren't, or even if the film was shot, to fill like an aspect ratio closer to 1080p, or they released it closer to 1080p, and now because we have 4K, they want to preserve more of the original aspect ratio of the film.
Actual film,
35 millimeter film is almost perfect for 4K.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why so many of the 4K releases from older movies look so freaking good, is because they were shot on film and it wasn't digital. But again, my question would be, and this is, maybe you can answer this, Brandon, because I'm not sure, but the black bars are, it's filmed, and they have the black bars, on the cameras that they're shooting, but it's still capturing everything
I was gonna
outside
say,
of those bars.
Yeah, the anamorphic lenses that they typically shoot.
So are they
with.
just removing the black bars and letting us see what was beyond to
No,
fill the screen? Or how
most
are
of
they
the
doing
time,
that?
the black bars are not. I mean, that's something. It's a cheap trick, typically in editing, you can add to try to make it appear as if you're adding a different aspect ratio. But usually on like these streaming services, that was why they would always typically have on like DVDs, this film has been formatted from its original version to fit your TV.
Right.
Where you would get the black bars as a result because the TV itself is square, but the picture is literally the whole picture. It's just being shrunk down to fit the entire picture on your screen.
Right, but then we had widescreen TVs.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that
and so,
eliminates that.
well, and I was going to say it depends because 16 by 9 is not typical film format, which is why you have like, I think it's a 1.9 by 1 ratio for IMAX. I can't remember. I know typically like 2.31 by 1 or something is another film aspect ratio. So it's like, even now when you watch content, because on Netflix or any streaming service, you'll see black bars, and the actual thickness of the black bars will change depending on the content based on how it was filmed, because they're trying to show you the full picture. Or something like, say, Tenet, or filmed in IMAX that Nolan's films have done. Oh gosh, what was the war pick? Dunkirk. You'll see these huge sweeping, like they take up the full screen.
Right.
And the reason that is because they're shrinking the image down to fit within the aspect or the aspect ratio, but it ultimately is filling up the entire display.
Right. Because
the film itself that they shot on captured that full image.
What I'm reading is it was filmed on Super 35 millimeter, and it was actually did have a bit of a large, like not IMAX per se aspect ratio, but it did have a larger aspect ratio that was cropped down to the ratio you saw in theaters. So what they did is they kind of, all that extra that was in the scene that they cropped out will be seen because they released these movies.
Well, no. But when they crop it out, what they're doing is they're taking the image and they're blowing it up to actually fill the full screen. So when they they're cropping out that, but when they shrink it down, you're getting the full image, but you'll still see the black bars.
Well, for this, apparently, I'm not sure how it'll work.
I'm almost certain you'll see black bars on these films, except for the scenes that are shot in IMAX.
Oh yes, absolutely.
But anything that was shot without the full, because IMAX even in of itself is not 16 by 9.
No.
But it fits nicely into a frame where you may clip off a little bit of the top parts of the image when you shrink it down, but you're gonna, when you preserve the sides, you'll
anything
see
shot
it'll
in
be full
IMAX
screen.
Will be full screen, and apparently with Iron Man, some of these specific scenes, especially some of the visual effects scene, will have the larger aspect ratio because they did this. They had an IMAX release for these movies in the past, and that's what they're using for this Disney Plus release, are the ones that were enhanced for IMAX for re-releases.
Awesome.
So Iron Man does have where they opened it up because they had open matte cropping. And so now what was cropped out will be seen with this IMAX release, but it's still not quite the same.
Now when they talk about that, though, Sean,
visually impressive as the films that were actually shot with IMAX for IMAX, because what we're getting is like basically a lot of things that were cropped out.
Well, I was going to say when they're talking about open matte cropping, they're intentionally putting a matte box over the image.
That's what I thought they used to do with film. Digitally, they can. That all happens in camera, I would assume. But with film,
and all that depends on like the lenses you shoot with.
Yeah.
Because honestly, I mean, truth be told, if you shoot with anamorphic lenses versus regular full frame lenses, it's going to all print the film differently. So they'll sometimes crop the picture only so that it all is seamless across the board.
Yeah.
Versus like, oh, this one scene you're going to have the black boxes adjusting throughout.
Yeah, so they're going to open up what was cropped out, basically. So it's not really like with the first Iron Man we're gaining much, like the other movies that were actually filmed for IMAX, but still, it's cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's, again, to me, the whole wonderful thing about this is preserving the director's vision.
Yeah.
It's always, how closely can we imitate what we saw in theaters, what was the final product at home in the comfort of our own chairs.
Yeah.
Nice.
Right, dude.
What's the next part?
Yeah, let's move along.
Well, it's also up there talking about Weta being bought out.
Weta?
Now, it's a little misleading
Weta?
because the article that is linked in the description below, but ultimately, Weta's being bought out, but really it's kind of being ciphered off a little bit.
First of all, for people who don't know, explain what Weta is.
So Weta Digital got its claim to fame back on the Lord of the Rings films when Peter Jackson took on helmed that huge trilogy.
Co-founded Weta Digital.
He co-founded it because at the time
Weta Digital was also in the Frighteners.
Well, I was going to say they started out before
earlier.
Lord of the Rings, and they kind of the challenge became what would be impossible to film or is thought of to be impossible to film, and that was where Weta stepped up and tried to create some effects, and then that gave Peter Jackson the idea of seeing some of these effects that they were creating, of saying, well, Lord of the Rings has always thought to be impossible to film.
They were around before Lord of the Rings, but Lord of the Rings is definitely what put Weta on the map.
Yes, easily.
But granted, I mean,
it really was the first, I would say, production or special effects production house to give ILL some extreme competition.
Oh, yeah.
ILM.
I would say,
extreme
and for its
competition.
time and for what the movie is, Frighteners does have impressive special effects. I've always loved that movie.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt.
It's definitely an underrated. It's kind of more of a pop culture hit than it is an actual hit. But I do like it. It is humorous. But yeah, it is cool that, like you were saying, they're not buying like all of Weta. They're basically buying the engineers. It's being siphoned off.
Well, we didn't say who. I didn't say Unity.
Oh, yeah. Unity is buying for $1.6 billion, and it says that the visual effects team is going to be siphoned off to Weta FX, and the engineers and all of the software that was created by Weta is what Unity's purchasing.
Which makes sense. So Unity is kind of they kind of work in tandem with other engines that create special effects, but that's kind of their hallmark.
But it's video games.
Well, video games, yeah.
And it sounds
But
like
I think
maybe they're buying stuff to build their own engine.
Yeah, I've never seen Unity's logo in any
right.
film credit
No.
or anything like that.
And
it's
it seems
mostly
like
video games.
And
what
it doesn't
they-
seem like they're
who
going
knows?
to film. They could, but it doesn't seem like with this purchase they're moving to film either. It seems kind of to me like they're buying engineers.
They
to
want the
create
software
more.
tools to create more realistic video games.
Yes.
But and that's kind of the weird thing, though, is I think this purchase in and of itself kind of proves the notion of that bridging that gap that we've talked about through all of our lifetime or our whole lifetime, because special effects really started to kind of gear up towards the end of the 80s and into the 90s. You know, when you saw T2 and Jurassic Park, we started to see computer animation, and then with the launch of Pixar. And I've always heard people kind of say, I can't wait to play a video game where it looks like you're playing a Pixar film.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, I think now it's kind of we're getting to that precipice. And so I really think you're starting to see with this purchase a combination of the toolkits that animators use for video games and for films kind of coming from the same place.
And if you don't mind, I was going to read just this brief
go ahead.
paragraph that kind of, it says, Weta Digital's 275 plus engineers will join Unity. The VFX artist will be spun out into a new entity, Weta FX, of which Peter Jackson will continue to own the majority.
Awesome.
The two companies expect to continue working together, which makes sense. So Weta FX will still use the engineers that they had previously.
Yeah.
It says...
Kind of like Johnny Ive leaving Apple, but he still designs for them.
So the two companies expect to continue working together, with Unity noting that it sees Weta FX being one of their largest customers in the media and entertainment space moving forward. So Weta FX will still use those engineers. I guess they'll have to pay Unity now, but
they'll license it out. But that's the thing, is it's like Unity now has the obligation to provide a toolkit that's worthy for
it says
filmmaking.
Meanwhile,
toolkits.
Unity will be taking over the development of Weta Digital's many built-in house tools. So they will have to, especially if Weta FX is still going to continue to use them. They'll still have to develop these things for movies along with the video games.
Yeah, and working in and we've seen. I think before the show, Sean, you were talking about Unreal Engine 5. We've all seen. How amazingly beautiful. Well, and honestly, actually, no.
Gorgeous.
I take that back. Unreal Engine 5 was used on The Mandalorian. They used it in creation of the space that I forget what they called it.
The background.
The huge room that was all LEDs.
And that's starting to be used by even, like, they're saying that, I forget the name of, there's a movie production that's actually using that now.
Well, yeah, because it's basically, they used it on in Star Wars, the latest trilogy.
It creates like a three-dimensional backdrop instead of...
It's better than green screen.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. And no doubt The Mandalorian proves that. And it's like, for one, it's better for the actors and the people who are involved to see the realization of it coming to life, but also it really does. It's like, okay, you still have to build it all in computer, but to actually see it, it's like, well, if it's filmed that way, it almost makes it more tangible to where it's like, okay, we don't have to go back and post and add all this in and do all this rotoscoping, and it all just looks more realistic.
Yeah, they call it virtual. They're virtual. I think there's a more name than that.
There is. They call it a certain name on The Mandalorian.
Yeah, insiders saying virtual sets. I was trying to find the actual name
because they coined it. John Favreau coined it.
Yeah,
they jokingly called it something because
but they used Unreal. Unreal Engine to do that. But like everybody that I've seen that has set foot on a set that uses that have said they've been completely blown away.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Well,
even actors
I've
have said it
seen
kinda helps
these
'cause they have a
environments
visual.
that they've showcased with Unreal Engine 5, and because of the certain assets that you can either buy from third parties or even what they license out, you can buy these assets for the graphics engine that simulate real world, like rocks, water, all these different artifacts that ultimately I mean, you could build a virtual set of a given environment within the matter of a few days or even a few hours if you're experienced. And yet you're sitting there and having this ability to create these at a moment's notice to where you could be filming with it in the afternoon. That's pretty spectacular. Oh, yeah. That's absolutely mind-blowing and amazing. Instead of it taking months and months to either render or even get a finished product that has to be reviewed and say, well, we want to tweak this, or that's just mind blowing. So to see that convergence of video games and films coming from different backgrounds, initially, but really solving a purpose of graphic artists just having an easier way to create and
Something
become
that
more
looks
photorealistic.
More realistic, yeah.
So it's awesome, good news, and we didn't even really talk about if Peter Jackson's still at the helm of Weta FX and using them primarily. He made a big. I bet you he's got a good chunk of change from this deal. Then.
Yeah. Well, it says that 1.6 billion is the deal to buy just these engineers.
And if he's got a majority stakeholder, then he just pocketed a lot of money.
I would say Peter Jackson is a smart businessman, and I mean, the things he does has been he's chosen select works, and you can kind of tell that, kind of like Kevin Feige, it's like he has the eye for details that keeps him where he's at. It's like he doesn't produce constantly like other directors, but I think that's a good thing because that's why he's.
It's kind of what Steven Spielberg has slipped into over the last few years, but ultimately I would say a greater impact on the industry. This sounds bad. I think Steven Spielberg has a great creative impact on the industry with his legacy. Mm-hmm. I think Peter Jackson has it from a standpoint of pushing and moving the industry forward.
Yes.
Because even then, I mean, as lukewarm as The Hobbit was, it was still a technical marvel compared to what the story was, and he's always done that. But he hasn't put it so much at the forefront that the story itself or the movie itself suffers.
Spielberg has kind of gotten into the producing the next big like blockbuster or thing, whereas like you said, I agree, Jackson more as innovative.
Yeah, and I just think the lasting legacy of Spielberg will be the films he made early in his career, more so than his late in his life, True. And ultimately that Peter Jackson will have. Always his claim to fame will be the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but ultimately even what he's pushed beyond. I mean, hell, it was Gollum that pushed James Cameron to do Avatar, and then from there it's like he does the 48 frames and the
and even reworking ancient like
documentary footage,
footage, 100-year-old footage.
Yeah, those will not grow old.
Well, Peter Jackson innovates. That documentary is something like James Cameron's produced tons of documentaries. None of them push boundaries like that.
Right.
So
he always looks to maintain the essence of what was supposed to be achieved, but also at the same time pushes the industry forward in ways that they really weren't thinking of before. And Peter Jackson's awesome.
Yeah.
I'll just
fanboying out over that.
I am. Oh, Peter Jackson. Oh, Peter.
I think that was
Homeward Bound.
A good show. That was a good show.
Peter.
Oh my God. What is he doing?
Homeward Bound when he's in the hole.
I know, but still, it's like
when he's in the hole.
Yeah, I love that movie.
Oh, Peter,
it's really
I love you.
I've watched it as an adult.
I love he says that when he comes back and he's running towards. He's like, Peter, I love you so.
Yeah.
I've missed you
Peter.
so.
That's my boy.
That's my boy.
Alrighty, yes, it was a good show.
Something doesn't smell right. It's like we gotta go home. Like when they
we
leave,
gotta
it's
go
like,
home.
It's like
smell right.
He's like they've never been away this long because they tried it with the dogs.
Yeah,
it's
I know,
like instead of something doesn't feel right, it's like something doesn't smell right. They've been gone too long.
Can't beat Michael J. Fox and Sally Field, man.
Chance.
Oh yeah,
Chance and Sassy.
Sassy.
He says the pup's
I
gonna
don't
learn.
want it. I don't want on, and he gets the quill.
Alrighty,
Make me go home
guys.
and watch that now.
I know. What
Man.
is it on? Is it
It's on Disney Plus.
Oh, it
You can
is.
watch,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
It's on Disney Plus.
Alrighty, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. But as always, like, share, subscribe on all of our social content. Right there at the bottom of your screen. Red Moon Book, Red Moon
Yeah.
Tweet, Red Moon Pics.
Yeah,
And search for Red Moon Productions on YouTube.
if they just want to send us an electronic mail for us to read,
We have a way to do that too.
Huh.
Right there at the bottom of your screen, Keith.
right here,
Yeah. Oh, he
Yeah.
got it.
it says. I'm gonna read it.
He can't.
I'm trying to read
Come
it.
on,
It's
Joe.
dyslexic.
Ar-
He can't read it.
It's hard, yeah.
Hold on. Let me get your cue card.
Oh man.
Oh, she's here to help.
She's
She's
here
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 to
we go.
help.
Let's do this together.
She's trying to put the words
Tell 'em.
literally
Tell
in your
'em.
mouth.
RMPodcast at redmoonproductions.com. They may not have heard the back end there a little bit. I tried to be a little louder.
No, but that
You
that
know.
was perfect. Sean,
Yeah.
do you want to repeat it just for
Oh,
you know,
sure. RMPodcast at redmoonproductions.com.
just beautiful, just fancy. Couldn't have said it better.
I'm making her
myself.
eat her tail now, so it's all good.
But that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Like, share, subscribe, share all of our content. Tune in next week live every Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Thank you all so much. I am one of your hosts, Brandon Davidson, alongside our normal new host,
Sean Sebastian.
And what was it, Bill?
Bill Bradshaw Biddlesworth.
I guess that was it.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. For more reviews, previous podcast shows, and everything Red Moon, visit our website, redmoonproductions.com. You can also like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter by searching for Red Moon Productions, LLC. We'll see you at the movies.